Here's something that might make you uncomfortable. Right now, across the country, millions of people are rushing to fill their pantries. They're buying more, spending more, stacking more, and a significant number of them are actively making their situation worse with every single dollar they spend. The average American household already loses around $1,500 a year to food waste under normal conditions. During a panic buying surge, that number climbs. People don't waste money on things they hate, they waste it on things they bought out of fear and never touched. And when it comes to emergency food storage and pantry mistakes, fear is the most expensive shopping companion you will ever bring into a grocery store. So here's the question I want you to sit with before we go any further. What if the pantry you're building right now, the one that's supposed to protect your family, has critical gaps in it that you don't even know exist? What if you're filling it with the wrong things, in the wrong quantities, with the wrong plan, and you won't find out until the moment you actually need it? That's exactly what we're going to fix today. I'm going to walk you through 15 specific pantry mistakes that I see people making constantly, especially right now when food prices are climbing and supply uncertainty is real. For each one, we're going to talk about the science behind why it fails, what people get wrong, and exactly what to do instead. And I want to give you a heads up about number 7. That one is the mistake that surprises even experienced, longtime preppers, the people who think they've figured all of this out. So stay with me. One more thing before we dive in. If this kind of practical, honest pantry guidance is what you're looking for, hit subscribe. No fluff, no fear-mongering, just real information that actually helps. Now let's get into it. Mistake number 1. Stocking food your family won't actually eat. This one sounds almost too obvious to say out loud. And yet it is, without question, the single most common pantry mistake I have ever seen, heard about, or personally made myself. And it happens for a very specific reason that is worth understanding. When human beings feel threatened, when they sense scarcity, when they see news coverage of empty shelves, when their social feed fills up with people talking about a food crisis, the brain shifts into what behavioral economists call a scarcity mindset. And in that mental state, judgment gets narrower. You stop thinking about what your family actually eats and you start thinking about what sounds survivable. Dried beans, rice in bulk, canned spinach, textured vegetable protein, lentils that nobody in your house has ever looked at sideways. Here's the hard truth. If your household doesn't eat it today, stress will not magically make them eat it later. That is especially true with children, and it is especially true for anyone with food sensitivities, digestive quirks. The argument that if they're hungry enough, they'll eat anything is not preparedness thinking. It's wishful thinking. And it is a setup for a crisis inside the crisis. The fix is simpler than people expect. Take a piece of paper, actual paper, write it down, and list 20 dinners that your family genuinely eats without complaint. Then list the ingredients those meals require. That list is your pantry blueprint. If beans aren't on it, don't buy 100 pounds of beans. If your family eats pasta twice a week, pasta belongs in your pantry in quantity. Stock the reality of your household, not the fantasy of a theoretical survivor. The research on this is clear. The average American household cycles through approximately 9 distinct dinner meals on a regular rotation. 9. That means your actual pantry needs to support 9 meals really well, not 100 meals theoretically. Start there and you are already ahead of most people building their emergency food storage right now. Mistake number 2. Buying large quantities of commercially ground flour. Flour feels foundational. It's in bread, biscuits, pancakes, thickeners, coatings. It touches almost everything we bake and cook. So it makes complete sense that when people think about building a serious pantry, flour is near the top of the list. It also makes it one of the more heartbreaking pantry mistakes, because commercially ground flour is significantly more fragile than almost anyone realizes. Here's the science, and I want you to actually understand this because it will change how you think about a lot of things. When wheat is milled into flour, the bran and germ are either removed entirely or cracked open. Both the bran and germ contain oils. Those oils, once exposed to air, begin oxidizing immediately. This is a chemical process called lipid oxidation, and as it progresses, the oils break down into compounds called aldehydes and ketones. Those compounds are what you're smelling when you open a bag of flour that's gone rancid, that sharp chemical smell that's closest to paint thinner. This process happens even in sealed containers because there is residual oxygen and moisture present at the time of milling. Airtight storage slows it down. It does not stop it. Under ideal conditions, airtight container, cool temperature between 50 and 70 degrees, low humidity, dark storage, commercially ground all-purpose flour has an optimal shelf life of 6 to 12 months and an absolute maximum. After that, even if it technically hasn't gone rancid, the nutritional value has degraded significantly. The practical answer: only stock what you can realistically use within a year, then backfill as you go. If long-term flour storage matters to you, whole wheat berries, unmilled, sealed with oxygen absorbers, that's the real solution if baking is central to your preparedness plan. Mistake number 3. Stockpiling cooking oils in large quantities. Every cooking oil you own has a shelf life that is probably shorter than you think, and the same lipid oxidation process that ruins flour. Here's why. Oils are composed of fatty acid chains, and those chains vary in their level of saturation. Highly unsaturated oils, like vegetable oil, canola oil, and flaxseed oil, oxidize the fastest because their double-bonded carbon chains are chemically reactive with oxygen. Even with a sealed container, in a dark environment at moderate temperature, vegetable oil has an optimal shelf life of around 1 to 2 years unopened and 6 to 12 months once the seal is broken. Olive oil does marginally better, 18 to 24 months unopened, but once you've opened it, you're working with a 6 to 12 month window before quality degrades noticeably. Heat and light accelerate rancidity exponentially. A bottle of oil stored in a warm pantry near the stove will go rancid in a fraction of the time of one stored in a cool, dark cabinet. The two legitimate exceptions are ghee and coconut oil. Ghee, clarified butter with the milk solids removed, can last 1 to 3 years sealed at room temperature. Coconut oil, being highly saturated, oxidizes slowly and can last 2 years or more sealed. These are your genuine long-term storage oils. For everything else, stock what you will use within a year, rotate it consistently, and don't let anyone convince you that buying 20 liters of olive oil, it is not. Mistake number 4. Building a pantry full of water-dependent foods without a water plan. This is the mistake I want you to really sit with for a moment because it is far more serious than it sounds. Think about the foods that form the backbone of most emergency pantries. Dried beans, white rice, pasta, freeze-dried meals, oatmeal, powdered mixes of every description. These are all legitimate, valuable foods. They also all share one hard dependency: they require substantial water to prepare. And the uncomfortable truth is that in many scenarios where a food crisis is severe enough to activate your emergency pantry, FEMA recommends storing a minimum of 1 gallon of water per person per day. But 1 gallon per person per day is a survival floor. It covers drinking and basic sanitation. It does not cover cooking dried beans, which requires several cups of soaking water plus boiling water. It does not cover cooking a full pot of rice. A standard single-serving freeze-dried meal requires approximately 1 to 2 cups of water to rehydrate. A full day of freeze-dried eating for one adult can require 6 to 8 cups or more. That is close to half a gallon, just for food, before a single drop for drinking, hygiene, or sanitation. The solution is a layered approach. Think in 3 tiers. Foods you can prepare under normal water conditions. Foods you can prepare if water is limited. And foods you can eat with little to no water at all. Things like canned proteins, ready-to-eat items, and certain freeze-dried foods that are palatable straight from the package. Build all 3 layers into your pantry, not just the first one, and you eliminate the single point of failure that makes so many emergency food plans collapse. Mistake number 5. Storing foods that require excessive fuel to cook. Most people think about food and water when they build an emergency pantry. Almost nobody thinks about cooking fuel. And in a real disruption, fuel is the variable that turns a manageable situation into a genuinely difficult one. Here's the math that most people have never run. Dried beans, one of the most recommended emergency staples, require 1 to 3 hours of sustained simmering to become edible. A standard 16-ounce Coleman propane canister, the kind you'd use with a camp stove, costs about $6 and provides roughly 1 to 2 hours of cooking time at medium heat. Those figures can vary based on altitude, temperature, and stove model, but this is a reasonable working estimate. That means cooking a single pot of beans from scratch could consume an entire propane canister, or more. Now multiply that across days or weeks of meals for your household. Suddenly your fuel supply is not a background consideration, it is a frontline constraint on what you can actually eat. The fix is the same principle we talked about with water. Build a fast version of every slow-cook staple. If you store dried beans, also store canned beans. Ready in 5 minutes, 0 extended fuel required. If you store dry rice, keep some instant rice as well. If you store dried pasta, a can of ravioli or stew covers the nights when cooking from scratch isn't practical. Convenience, in a genuine crisis, is worth its weight in gold. A small fondue pot running on a tea light candle can heat a can of soup to an edible temperature using almost no fuel at all. That is not a joke. That is a real preparedness strategy. Mistake number 6. Spending thousands on emergency food buckets. I understand the appeal. I genuinely do. You see a bucket with a 25-year shelf life, a dramatic label, a promise that it will feed your family through anything, and it feels like an accomplishment. Like you've solved a problem in one purchase. The problem is that you haven't actually solved anything until you've opened that bucket and fed it to your family. Here's what the labels don't prominently feature. Many commercial emergency meal kits are formulated to be caloric minimums, not satisfying portions. Consumer reviews consistently note that standard emergency food kits often provide 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day per person, well below the 2,000 to 2,500 calories most adults require under normal conditions, and significantly below what the body needs under stress. The serving sizes are smaller than what most families are accustomed to. The sodium content in some products exceeds 2,000 milligrams per meal, and the taste profile is simply not what your family is used to eating. The absolute worst time to discover that your family can't tolerate these foods, physically or psychologically, is during the emergency when you need them. The solution is straightforward. Buy one bucket. Make the meals. Eat them for 2 or 3 days straight and see how your body responds and how your family reacts. If it works, buy more. If it doesn't, you've spent $50 to $100 to avoid a much larger and much more painful mistake. Mistake number 7. Treating your freezer as your primary food security strategy. Here it is. The one I told you about at the top. And I want to be clear before I say this. I love my freezer. I use my freezer constantly. This is not an argument against owning or using a freezer. This is an argument against making your freezer the centerpiece of your food security plan. The freezer has one hard dependency. 1. Electricity. And electricity in the United States right now is less reliable than it has been in decades. The American Society of Civil Engineers has given U.S. energy infrastructure a C- grade in its most recent infrastructure report card, reflecting an aging grid that is increasingly stressed by extreme weather events it was never designed to handle. The average American experiences roughly 8 hours of power outage annually. In storm-prone regions, the Gulf Coast, parts of the Southeast, areas prone to ice storms, that figure climbs to 20 or more hours per year, and individual events can last days or weeks. According to USDA food safety guidelines, a full freezer maintains safe temperatures for approximately 48 hours during a power outage. A half-full freezer holds for about 24 hours. After that, you are looking at potential food safety concerns across everything you have stored. The practical takeaway is not to unplug your freezer. It is to build a robust, shelf-stable pantry that can sustain your household independently of whether the freezer is running. Your freezer is a supplement to that pantry, not the foundation of it. And have a plan, a real practice plan, for what happens if you need to rapidly process everything in your freezer before it's lost. Pressure canning. Dehydrating. Cooking and consuming quickly. Know the plan before you need it. Mistake number 8. Buying in bulk without storage infrastructure. Let me give you a number that might reframe how you think about bulk buying. A 5-gallon food-grade bucket holds approximately 33 pounds of white rice. 33 pounds of white rice contains roughly 52,000 calories. For a single adult eating 2,000 calories a day, that is 26 days of food in one bucket. A family of 4 eating the same would exhaust it in about 6.5 days. I want you to sit with that math for a second, because most people who buy bulk rice have no idea how many calories are in their storage, how many days it represents for their specific household, or how many buckets they actually need. They just know they bought a lot of rice. Buying in bulk is one of the smartest things you can do for pantry preparedness. Buying in bulk without the proper storage infrastructure is one of the most expensive mistakes. And I mean that literally. Improperly stored grains, in original paper or plastic packaging, at room temperature, without oxygen absorbers, can be contaminated by weevil larvae within 2 to 3 months. The insects aren't invading from outside, they're often already present as eggs when you purchase the product. Oxygen absorbers, sealed mylar bags inside food-grade buckets, eliminate that problem almost entirely. Beyond pest control, you need a first-in, first-out rotation system. Every item in your pantry should be dated when it enters. Your oldest items should be at the front and used first. New stock goes to the back. This is called FIFO, first in, first out, and it is the single most important organizational principle. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've made any of these first 8 mistakes. I promise you're in very good company. Mistake number 9. Building your pantry foundation around comfort foods and treats. Let me say something important before I say the uncomfortable thing. Morale matters in a crisis. I mean that seriously. The psychological dimension of food, the comfort, the familiarity, the small pleasures, is real and it is legitimate. A piece of chocolate, a familiar snack, a cup of good coffee can have a measurably positive effect on mental state during a stressful period. I am not here to tell you to stock nothing but beige nutrition. But here is the problem. In a crisis, caloric density, nutritional completeness, and shelf life are what sustain you physically. And most comfort foods and treats are expensive on a per-calorie basis, nutritionally marginal, and short-lived on a shelf. A bag of freeze-dried Skittles runs approximately $15 and provides around 400 calories. The same $15 spent on canned protein, tuna, chicken, salmon, provides somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 calories and significant nutritional value. The framework I'd suggest is the 80-20 rule. Roughly 80% of your pantry budget and storage space should go to foundational nutrition, proteins, complex carbohydrates, healthy fats, fruits and vegetables in preserved form. The remaining 20% can go to morale items, the things that make a difficult situation feel a little more human. Coffee, by the way, is foundational. I will not be argued with on that. Build the foundation first. The treats come after, not before, and not instead. Mistake number 10. Stocking specialty diet foods you don't currently follow. A crisis is the single worst possible time to experiment with a new way of eating. I want you to understand why that's not just a preference, it's biology. The human gut microbiome, the community of bacteria and microorganisms that regulate digestion, immune function, and even mood, adapts slowly to dietary change. Research on gut microbiome adaptation suggests that significant dietary shifts typically require 3 to 4 weeks before the gut flora adjusts to new food types. During that adjustment period, common symptoms include bloating, cramping, changes in digestion, fatigue, and general gastrointestinal distress. Under normal circumstances, those symptoms are inconvenient. Under crisis conditions, when you are already managing elevated stress, disrupted sleep, and physical demands, those symptoms are genuinely debilitating. This is why stocking gluten-free products when you don't require a gluten-free diet, or deciding you'll go carnivore, or start keto during an emergency. It is also simply more expensive. Gluten-free pasta costs approximately 2 to 3 times as much as conventional pasta per pound. Specialty diet products across the board carry a premium that, at bulk pantry scale, represents a significant and unnecessary drain on your preparedness budget. Stock your current dietary reality, not your dietary aspirations. Your pantry is not the place to start a wellness journey. Mistake number 11. Buying fresh produce without a preservation plan. Here's a scenario that plays out more often than you'd think. You see a flat of strawberries at a fantastic price, $3 for a full pound, or a deal so good you feel like you'd be leaving money on the table if you didn't grab 2 flats. So you grab them. You bring them home. And then you stand in the kitchen looking at 24 pounds of strawberries and realize you have about 4 days before they start turning on you. Soft fruits like strawberries, peaches, and raspberries typically have a window of 3 to 7 days before quality degrades significantly. Even hardier produce, apples, carrots, winter squash, begins to deteriorate within 2 to 4 weeks without refrigeration. The produce is not the problem. The plan is. According to USDA estimates, approximately 30 to 40% of the U.S. food supply is wasted annually, and research on household food behavior shows that impulse purchases of fresh produce, especially during perceived shortage periods, are a consistent contributor. The solution is a simple mindset shift. Know your processing capacity before you buy. If you can freeze, can, dehydrate, or freeze dry within your available time and equipment, buy accordingly. If you're working a full-time job and have a weekend available, be honest about what you can actually process in 48 hours. A smaller quantity you actually preserve is worth infinitely more than a larger quantity that goes in the compost bin. Stick around, because mistake 13 is the one that almost nobody in the preparedness community talks about, and it may be the most dangerous gap in your entire system. Mistake number 12. Storing food that requires skills or equipment you don't have. This one is the dividing line. On one side of this line are people who are genuinely prepared. On the other side are people who feel prepared. And the difference between those two groups is not the quantity of food they own. It is not even the quality of their storage. It is this: the ability to actually use what they have stored, under stress, without outside assistance. There is a well-documented phenomenon in performance psychology and skill acquisition research that describes what happens when people attempt unfamiliar tasks under pressure. Performance of novel skills under stress degrades significantly compared to well-practiced skills. Some research on stress and cognitive performance. In plain language, the first time you try to figure out how to use your grain mill, or manage a pressure canner, or run a camp stove you've never fired up before, that first attempt, under crisis conditions, is going to go worse than you expect. Owning equipment is not the same as knowing how to use equipment. Owning ingredients is not the same as having the skills to turn them into food. The preparedness system that actually works has 4 components, all of which must be present. The food itself, the tools to prepare it, the knowledge of how to use those tools safely and effectively, and actual practice, meaning you have done it before you need to. The CDC reports approximately 25 cases of botulism annually linked to home canned foods in the United States, the majority associated with improper pressure canning technique. That is not a stat to frighten you away from canning. Home canning is an incredibly valuable skill. It is a stat to underline that these skills have real consequences when they go wrong, and learning them for the first time under pressure is how they go wrong. Build the skill alongside the supply, not after. Mistake number 13. Neglecting medications and health supplies. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, federal and state emergency managers identified several recurring themes in the population requiring acute medical assistance. One of those themes, documented in post-disaster assessment reports, was the inability to access prescription medications. People who were otherwise healthy and physically unaffected by the immediate disaster required emergency intervention, simply because their ongoing medication supply had been interrupted. Medication access disruption was among the top reasons for medical emergency presentations in the weeks following the storm. And yet the overwhelming majority of preparedness content, including most pantry-focused content, treats food as the only category that matters, and mentions medications as an afterthought if it mentions them at all. Here is a number worth considering. Americans fill approximately 6.6 billion prescriptions annually. Roughly 90% of those are generic medications, and a significant and growing proportion of generic drug active ingredients are manufactured overseas, primarily in India and China, creating a supply chain dependency that a trade disruption or global crisis. Your medication supply is not immune to the same pressures affecting your food supply. The practical steps are achievable for most people. Start by inventorying your over-the-counter medication use: pain relief, antihistamines, antacids, cold and flu medications, electrolyte powders, and stock a 90-day supply of each. For prescription medications, Have a direct conversation with your prescribing physician about your preparedness concerns. Many physicians will work with patients to authorize a 90-day supply or a backup prescription for cash payment, particularly for maintenance medications. Not all medications allow this. Some controlled substances have legal limits on supply quantities, but the conversation is worth having. Your health infrastructure and your food infrastructure are equally important. Do not let one get a year ahead of the other. Mistake number 14. Underestimating the importance of water security. Water is not a category in your preparedness plan. Water is the foundation that every other category rests on. Without it, your food stores are academic. Here is a simple piece of math that puts the common approach in perspective. A standard case of 24 16.9-ounce water bottles contains approximately 3 gallons of water. Under FEMA's minimum guideline of 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and basic sanitation, a family of 4 would exhaust that entire case in 18 hours. Not days. 18 hours. That is before a single cup of water has been used to cook rice, rehydrate a freeze-dried meal, make coffee, brush teeth with anything approaching normal volume, or handle basic wound care. The approach that actually works is a 3-tier system. First, stored potable water in food-grade containers, water bricks, dedicated water storage tanks, or sealed containers properly rotated on a schedule. Second, a gravity-fed filtration system capable of processing water from non-potable sources. A quality gravity filter can process thousands of gallons over its lifespan and requires no electricity. Third, a rainwater collection system appropriately sized for your location and climate, with collection directed through food-safe guttering into covered containers. These 3 tiers together mean that your water supply has redundancy. If one fails, the others cover you. Think about water with the same seriousness and the same level of investment that you bring to your food pantry. They are inseparable. Mistake number 15. Treating food preparedness as the entire picture. In the spring of 2020, it wasn't flour that disappeared first from grocery store shelves in the United States. It was toilet paper. And within days of that initial wave, shortages spread to cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer, over-the-counter medications, canned goods, baby formula, and pet food, simultaneously, across virtually every retail channel in the country. A 2021 McKinsey analysis of pandemic-era supply chains found that single-source dependencies were exposed across more than 180 product categories at once, a scope of simultaneous shortage. The same structural vulnerability exists in most households. The food pantry is well-stocked. Everything else is an afterthought. The preparedness system that actually functions under real conditions covers 6 non-food categories alongside paper goods, and yes, we all learned that one the hard way. Cleaning supplies stripped down to the genuine essentials: dish soap, laundry soap, disinfecting solution, bleach, multi-purpose cleaner. Personal hygiene items: shampoo, soap, deodorant, toothpaste, toothbrushes, feminine hygiene products, razors, cotton supplies. Baby and pet supplies, if they apply to your household, and dry pet food has a shelf life of roughly 6 months, so rotate it accordingly. Light and power backup, batteries, candles, rechargeable battery packs, and a plan for extended outages. And finally, physical cash in small denominations. Digital payment systems depend on the same infrastructure that can fail in an emergency, and during documented disaster scenarios, card payment systems have failed within hours of a crisis onset. Small bills matter because change may not be available. Build a complete system, not just a food pantry. A complete system. Every single mistake on this list has one thing in common. At its core, each one represents the same error: building something that looks like preparedness without actually functioning as preparedness. The beans nobody will eat. The flour that goes rancid. The freezer full of food with no plan for when the power goes out. The bucket of emergency food that tastes like nothing your family has ever willingly consumed. The concept I want you to take with you from today is the idea of the single point of failure. Every element of your preparedness system, food, water, fuel, health, power, non-food supplies, should have some form of redundancy. When any one of them fails, and something always eventually fails, the rest of the system should be able to carry the weight. That is not an overwhelming thing to build. It is a series of small, intentional decisions made over time. One extra can of tuna this week. One water brick next week. One conversation with your doctor about a 90-day prescription next month. You are not doing this because the world is terrifying. You are doing this because you are thoughtful enough to think ahead, and because the people in your household are worth protecting with something more than good intentions. Drop number 1 in the comments if you're committing to building your pantry the right way, intentionally, practically, and for the people who are actually going to be eating from it. I read every single one. And before you go, next time, we're flipping this entire list around. I'm going to show you the 10 most underrated foods that belong in every smart pantry, most of them available for under $2. These are the foods that experienced preppers quietly keep in quantity, while everyone else is fighting over the flashy stuff. You don't want to miss it. As always, be safe out there, and keep stacking it right, my friends.